Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, October 20th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the red wave year that is the 2022 midterm elections. Now, for a long period of time, over the past couple of months, post the Dobbs decision, we have been considering the fact that 2022 may no longer be a red wave year as it was previously described for the months leading into the Supreme Court's landmark decision. Now, when the Supreme Court released the Dobbs decision, the entire country went on a pause. Laws were being enforced, attorney generals were making statements, governors were coming out for or against a woman's right to choose, and an issue that 70% of Americans agree on women having a right to an abortion was at stake these midterm elections for the first time in 49 years. Now, when new things come into play on top of already a very crowded field when it comes down to issues of inflation, the economy, healthcare, COVID-19, whatever it might be, this was just adding into an already crowded field of topics for voters to weigh as they look to November. Issues such as crime have started to revamp itself in this election, foreign policy, Ukraine, Russia, whatever it might be. And all of these things were combining factors into how voters voted in November. And for a while, it looked like Democrats were getting what we called to be a post-Dobbs bump. But as of today, October 20th, 2022, less than 18 days until the election, the post-Dobbs bump is gone. On the Real Clear Politics average, on the 2022 generic congressional vote, the Republican Party now leads by 3.3% nationwide, officially garnering the highest amount of support nationwide that they've had this entire election cycle. Yes, more so than where it was under Governor Youngkin when he won his race in Virginia, more so than it was in January, February, March, April, and May of 2022. The Republicans are up, and they're up high. The question is, does this maintain itself until November? And another source that I love to look at is FiveThirtyEight's generic congressional ballot tracker, in which the Republican Party has also reclaimed the lead for the first time in 2 months, going on 3 months. The Republican Party had led for 9 consecutive months until Democrats took it from them on the 538 average, and that itself was a feat. But now Republicans lead by 0.1%, and it looks like this lead is here to stay. This lead for the GOP has resulted in national numbers shifting, but also forecast shifting as well on the House and Senate level. Today, Democrats have just a 21% chance at winning control of the House. That's down from where it was before at 32% during the peak for the Democratic Party when they were doing very well nationwide. Republicans have always had the House in the bag, but the question is, how large were they going to win by? But it is very clear. Over the past week alone, there has been a clear and consistent shift in favor of the Republican Party, and it's something that has come right in time for the midterm elections. The Republicans on the Senate level as well have made dramatic increases when it comes down to their chances at winning control of the Senate. Today, Democrats are at 59%, which still means they are the favorites, but it's a lot more of a toss-up than it was previously. Looking at the numbers prior to, Republicans were at a low point, 29% in terms of winning control of the Senate. Granted, it should be relatively easy. All they need is one seat, and the last time we had red wave midterm elections, 2010 and 2014, the Republican Party picked up 7 and 9 seats respectively, so for them to win one wasn't really asking that much. But the Senate map really wasn't working in their favor, and neither were their candidates. But similar to the House, we have seen a clear and consistent upward trend, and now Republicans are at their highest point since all the way back, when was this? In early August 2022. Though Republicans did start out with the advantage when it came down to this forecast, so technically speaking, Republicans are not in their best position, but that's not the takeaway I would get from this. Democrats were the favorites for month after month after month, and now today, that is faltering. The generic ballot has had Democrats in the lead for 2 consecutive months, and now Democrats have lost it. It is clear that right in time for the November midterm elections, the Republican Party has made significant and major advancements nationwide. The question is why? Well, it looks like gas prices are going back up. The question is why? Well, it looks like inflation is getting worse. The question is why? It looks like the American public no longer cares about the issue of abortion like they once did. And that's the problem for the Democratic Party. Because they knew when the Republican Party made this midterm election about the economy that they were going to lose control of the House and the Senate would be at the risk of being lost. But when the Dobbs decision happened, the American public and the party shifted to the issue of abortion. Because though Republicans knew it was an unpopular position, they still needed to win their primaries. It came around a time frame where Republicans were still running for elected office. They were still running to be chosen by their own groups of voters. So they took the most intense pro-life stance. And that has backfired on them in these general elections, but it looks like voters no longer care. When you look at a lot of the swing state polling data that has been done in a lot of these Senate races, combining states such as Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, when voters are asked about their top 5 most popular issues, in almost every single poll we have seen, abortion does not even make the top 5. In some states where abortion has been made a mainstream issue, such as Michigan, where they have an abortion referendum on the ballot, that's where Democrats are starting to do better, at least relative to where their numbers were before the Dobbs decision. In addition to that, it has also made abortion a top 3 issue, not even just top 5, a top 3 issue in states where you have these referendums on the ballot or where they had a referendum recently, such as Kansas. Michigan is a prime example as a swing state where there is a positive effect of having an abortion referendum on the ballot for the Democratic Party. Quite frankly, it's something that Democrats might want to consider doing so in the future. But just looking at our expectations for the GOP, for the Democratic Party in both the House and Senate level, the Democrats are not in this exceptional position like they once were. And when I say exceptional, it was exceptional relative to where we were nationwide. Republicans leading on the generic ballot would even rival an election year like 2016, where Democrats finalized on November 8th, 2016, 6 years ago from when our midterms will actually be. Democrats led by 1 point. If Republicans are ahead by 0.1, quite frankly, they are more than likely going to do better than this. We know historically that there is an underestimation of Republicans nationwide time and time again, and though a few bits of accuracy does not convince me that Democrats are going to win the national popular vote, and quite frankly, they will not. The GOP was always going to win control of the House, but the Senate is now called into question, and honestly, if I was to take these numbers and apply them to what we are expecting on our Senate map, I do not know how I would dictate control of the U.S. Senate. And that should be, something that really tells you that the state of the race is truly in toss-up scenario. Looking at my Senate forecast over the past few months, we have had the Democratic Party in control at different points in time, sometimes even gaining seats from the GOP. But the Republicans actually last led in my Senate map in May of 2022. If I was to make a Senate map today, I think I would actually have the GOP winning control of the Senate. I released a governor election prediction today that isn't exactly on this website just yet, but you can check it out. I released it just a few hours ago. You can see that my Senate map, my governor map, has narrowed down away from the Democrats. Kansas and Wisconsin have become lean red states. Nevada and Arizona have joined the Republican bunch. Democrats are no longer at this 23-seat scenario like they once were, and that's very bad news for the Democrats. But it also translates to losses in the Senate. One thing that I would say also that really, really jumps out at me as an extremely important race to watch is the state of Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman and Dr. Oz are now in a dead heat race per a brand new poll that has just been released. Ignore 2010. We'll get back to that in just a moment. Looking at a brand new poll that has just come out from the state of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro leads by 7, but John Fetterman is tied. The good news for Fetterman is that Insider Advantage is a Republican pollster. This is a pollster that is funded by Fox News. This is a pollster that is associated with Sean Hannity. So on one front, I would say don't read too much into this poll. But the race itself has definitely been narrowing down. From a race that was Fetterman plus 9 is now Fetterman plus 2. Well, there definitely is a narrowing down, and it isn't just this one individual poll, but rather most of the ones that we've seen released. The largest lead for Fetterman is 6 when he used to average at plus 9. A very different race from where it was before. And looking at the races in other states, for example, North Carolina Senate race, Ted Budd now leads by 4, an increase from where it was before. In Nevada Senate race, Adam Laxalt leads by 1. On the average, he's up by 1. Looking at a lot of these races, Ohio Senate, J.D. Vance leading. Arizona Senate, Mark Kelly only ahead by 1. Point is, the Democrats are not leading by nearly as much or even in the lead in some of these states as they once were after the Dobbs decision. It looks as if the pre-Dobbs numbers are very similar to where we are now. But you might be wondering, okay, does this have anything to do with President Biden? And in a sense, yes. But at the same time, I don't know if this actually is an impact of President Biden's approval rating getting slightly worse. You can see that over the past month now, from September 8th through October 20th, the disapproval rating and the approval rating have roughly been around the same. Though there's a slight uptick in President Biden's disapproval, it isn't enough to really explain this 4-point surge for the GOP on the generic ballot. Now, granted, the generic ballot was not in favor of the Democrats for a little bit on Real Clear Politics, but the big news is that it has changed on 538, because really, this one hasn't changed that much. Looking at the numbers, though, not only on the polling data itself, but also on the predicted odds, Republicans seemingly have this in the bag at 65 cents for control of the Senate, narrowing down the state of Georgia, winning in the state of Pennsylvania and Nevada, taking Nevada from the Democratic Party by, quite frankly, a significant amount. Maybe predicted is biased towards conservatives, at least right now. Maybe everyone is assuming the Republican Party is going to win because historically we have overestimated Democratic support. But honestly, I might be agreeing with the masses at this point in time as well. So maybe we aren't underestimating Democratic support. Not to suggest that we are overestimating Republican support, but maybe we have this at least somewhat spot on. There's less competitive races, there's more indicators of Republicans doing exactly as we expected 2 years ago, and it's a very predictable race when you have an unpopular Democratic incumbent. The thing that changed this race was the issue of abortion, and it looks like voters no longer care. Now, this sudden rise in GOP support is also something that really is not new to politics. Democrats and Republicans were neck and neck in 2010 when it came down to election data right up until the end. In the month of June, going into July, Democrats actually led on the generic ballot in 2010, but finalized with Republicans being ahead by 9.4% on election day. 9.4%. Now, granted, Republicans did end up winning by just 7 points, but it was the lead that really took them through the end, that ultimately told us that Democrats were not going to win this election. That 9.4% lead must have been so daunting for the Democratic Party, and it resulted in a 63-seat pickup for the GOP. This was not a 2002 type of midterm election, and it never was going to be. The question was this year going to be neutral? And it looks like it no longer is. The Republican Party is gaining. But as I said in the beginning of this video, the major question here won't be, do Republicans win control of the House? That is already going to happen. But rather, what happens now as we head into the final 3 weeks? What changes about Democratic strategy? What changes about Republican strategy? And what does this mean? Will this maintain itself over the next 3 weeks? My prediction as of now, if I was to say the election was held today based off the data I am given, Republicans win over 230 seats in the House and they win control of the Senate. Now, numbers can change between now and Election Day, but a significant portion of many swing state voters have already voted by mail, or already voted in person early. In addition to that, I will say that as of right now, this race looks like it's going to be quite steady by the time we reach November. It took a while for Republicans to take that lead from the Democrats, and it will take a while for Democrats to take it back, if they take it back. There is no question about it that American politics does change quite rapidly day in, day out. But looking at where we are right now, I do not think there is enough momentum on the Democratic Party side to overturn this Republican victory, at least in the House and on the national level. Historically, Republicans are underrepresented, and yet they lead by 3.3%. Historically, Democrats have done better in polling than in actuality. In 2020, Democrats led by 6.8. They won by 3.1. In 2018, Democrats did actually do slightly worse in polling than they did in actuality, but that's not always the case. 2014, Democrats were technically around a good point with Republicans. Republicans led by 2.4%. They ended up winning by 5.7. 2010, though, was also an oddball year like 2018, so it's not a perfect science, but we can also see this on the presidential level, which I'm sure we've already talked about way too much. Biden was overestimated in 2020, Clinton was overestimated in 2016, and though polling was quite accurate in 2012, it's a more recent thing than anything, but it's something to certainly take account for. Now, there is a slim chance, as we saw in the special elections, that the ratings and the polls and the numbers here are actually underestimating Democrats. When you look at the 2022 Senate special elections and the House elections, New York's 19th, New York's 23rd, Minnesota's 1st, Nebraska's 1st, Alaska at large, the polling data all overestimated Republican support and told us that Republicans were going to win those races by significantly larger margins than they actually did, or in some cases were so far off they predicted GOP victories of 8 to 9 points when Democrats ended up winning their races. For instance, in the state of Alaska, Mary Peltola was supposed to face off against Nick Begich in a one-on-one runoff election, instant runoff, due to ranked choice voting, and she was supposed to lose by 20. She ended up winning her race, and Nick Begich got third place. In New York's 19th district, all of the pundits rated it as a toss-up or lean Republican. You know what happened? The polls said that Mark Molinaro was going to win by 8 to 9 points. The Democrats ended up winning. When you take a look at Minnesota and Nebraska's 1st district, the ratings there likely safe Republican. What did it end up being? In some cases lean, or also barely likely, but single digits in races that Trump had won by double digits in the last election. Point is, polls aren't everything. We know that. And there have been cases more recently where Democrats are underestimated. But I don't know if that's the case, and I honestly wouldn't bet on it if I was a Democrat. I will say right now the GOP absolutely has an advantage nationwide, and it shows. It shows in the Senate forecast. It shows in the House forecast. It shows in the betting odds. It shows in the generic ballot on both 538 and Real Clear Politics and in President Biden's approval rating, and it's something that we have seen in the past. Does this maintain itself? That will be the question for voters. That will be the question for the polling industry as we finalize in the final 3 weeks of the campaign season. But ultimately, Republicans are doing better than they were before, and they have reclaimed the lead for the first time in months, and that's something to be happy about if you are a Republican. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to sorry about that. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to follow the Instagram and Twitter on the left and join the Discord on the bottom left of the screen. I will say I'm releasing an election night video, not an election prediction. Well, yes, an election prediction soon, but also an election night video sometime soon. It will be quite interesting. It will be sort of my final prediction. I'll release a prediction right before the election, but stay tuned for that. It'll be quite fun to watch. I'm doing a CNN theme, so it's going to be cool. It's going to be fun. Definitely stay tuned for it sometime in the next week. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.